fall in love with.
How often would he have to change the shell of the car, the appearance?
At that time, the hype of that was every year.
Every year?
Every year they change the sheet metal.
Wow. Is it true, Tom, that this colour, that you get this incredible sheen, it was derived from nail polish?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, can you see the glow? I mean, and again, it's the people matching their dress to the cars or the shoes. It's much more fashionable.
Sloan flipped what was important to the consumer on its head. Instead of engine and reliability being main stage, it was now the seemingly superficial add-ons, colour or tail fins that drove the sale.
Chevrolet's Royal Tone styling puts ever more emphasis on exterior color, a rainbow of 26 entirely new solid tone and two-tone color combinations.
So Sloan, did he reboot obsolescence in a way? Because before that it was planned obsolescence, things done to an object. And he made it about obsolescence being in your head. You yourself would choose to want the new.
Yeah, you don't need to buy a new car. In mechanical-wise, it's still brand new, year-old. But make you feel like the new one's better, and I have to have one is quite a genius way of doing things.
Yeah.
Soon, this idea, the organised creation of dissatisfaction, spread across the Western world, helping to drive economies during the boom years of the 1950s and 60s. And to Britain, as we came out of austerity.
Bathrooms go on getting better every year. They can be improved inexpensively, but it's nice to have a peep at one where money's been no object. The tap's running. Half an hour on the phone and she'll be underwater.
For 2 decades, consumers enjoyed a prosperity that was previously unimaginable.
The British had embraced consumerism and spending with as much enthusiasm as the Americans had before us. We enjoyed redoing our homes, changing our cars on a regular basis. But this new consumer paradise was about to be hit by hard economic fact.
At the end of the 60s, wages which had previously kept pace with prices began to stagnate. And by the mid-70s, when prices soared, we had a problem. People were looking through the shop window at the consumer paradise, but could no longer buy it.
A chrome standard lamp, a set of stacking stools, a cuddly black cat.
In 1974, this double whammy of rising prices and stagnating wages reached crisis point with the miners' strike.
We're not going to accept pennies. Well, my own fear, we're not going to accept pennies this time.
We've got to win it, haven't we? If it beats us, what chance has other people? They've no chance whatsoever.
This wasn't an elevated ideological struggle between left and right. These were angry consumers. Ted Heath paid the price, falling from power. The new Labour government fared no better, spectacularly failing to halt the fall in living standards. Economist Bernard Donahue ran re-elected Prime Minister Harold Wilson's policy unit.
Nice to meet you. Thank you very much.
And I don't think the Labour government fully understood, and I know I, in number 10, didn't fully understand, that the squeeze on real incomes, producing falling real incomes in the second half of the 1970s, meant that the workers wouldn't put up with it anymore.
Do you think that the trade unions were just really trying to keep up living standards for their members and, in a way, pursue the consumer dream?
The unions were reacting to the particular situation that their members were suffering reductions in their real incomes. A consequence of that is that they couldn't buy as many of the consumer goods as they'd grown accustomed to and their wives had assumed. So there was a move in the union movement towards individualism, materialism, a bit of grab what you can, regardless of the impact of the rest of society.
Demands for higher incomes led to repeated strike action, culminating in the winter of discontent.
In the shops, the threat to food supplies is getting larger every day.
By the end of the 1970s, consumerism Mark I was over, but its demise had threatened to make Britain ungovernable.
70s Britain feels like another country. So how did we go from the bleakness and conflict of that decade to a 21st century Britain, obsessed not with class war, but shopping?
The answer lay with one man, a wealthy chicken farmer, who wanted to use his money to bring about a new vision for Britain. Anthony Fisher brought the idea of battery farming to the UK, making millions from his company, Buxted Chickens.
Now, about a quarter of all the laying hens in this country are kept like this, often thousands of them all under one roof.
But Fisher wasn't just a chicken farmer. He cared passionately about freedom of the individual. Fisher believed the British people had been penned in by the state and by trade unions, and he wanted to set them free.
After the war, I found England slipping into socialism, the people somehow believing that government was going to solve all their problems.
In the late 1940s, Fisher had become enthralled by the ideas of a radical Austrian economist called Friedrich Hayek. Hayek believed that the government policies of the post-war period were a form of serfdom. Companies and individuals should be free to spend what they want. Fisher wanted to put Hayek's free market philosophy into action. He wanted to become a politician. But Hayek convinced him his money would be better spent on setting up a new type of organisation called a think tank.
He told me, keep out of politics and make your case to the intellectuals, that is, the teachers, the students, and the media, because they in turn influence the people.
Fisher followed Hayek's advice. In 1955, he set up the Institute of Economic Affairs. Through the years of Wilson and Heath, it toiled away in the wilderness. But with the turmoil of the 1970s, the IEA's moment had suddenly come. Patrick Minford was one of the many young economists who wrote for the organisation at the time.
The IEA was trying to explain to people how free markets worked, and that, you know, the best organization of an economy was one where individual consumers and producers were empowered to produce what people wanted. Market forces. And the idea was, you know, people would therefore produce better stuff that people actually wanted to buy.
No longer would Britain be divided by tribal loyalties, by communities built around localised production. Now we would be consumers, whose spending power would change our sense of belonging.
In free markets, the consumer is sovereign. The whole point of free markets is to give the consumer sovereignty and to allow people, ordinary people, to conduct their lives in a way they want, which is consumerism.
With Britain in chaos, the free market ideas of the IEA were seized upon by conservative politicians, then in opposition.
And then they want us all out. Angus, hello, in you go. And in particular, I'll bring you all out in a moment.
They were looking for an idea that would give Britain a new, unifying identity, built not on class war, but economic freedom and consumerism.
So these were the ideas that were starting to be pushed by writers for the IEA in the 70s. And they then were taken up by Mrs. Thatcher when she came into the leadership, and Keith Joseph, to formulate a new strategy.
Let me give you my vision. A man's right to work as he will, to spend what he earns, to own property, to have the state as servant and not as master. These are the British inheritance. They are the essence of a free economy, and on that freedom all our other freedoms depend.
The 70s saw Britain riven by ideological conflict, but the ideas of the Institute of Economic Affairs offered a way out. A new, depoliticised identity for ordinary people, not as workers, but consumers, freed to spend. The politicians promised us prosperity, built on the economic freedom of this new consumerism Mark II. But to some, this wasn't salvation. It was brainwashing. Just as 30 years earlier, with the man in the white suit, consumerism was attacked on film. This time it was a horror movie, Dawn of the Dead. Director George Romero portrayed consumer society not as a form of freedom, but as a new type of slavery.
To Romero, the consumer was not an individual, but a zombie, blindly following the herd into the shopping mall.
What are they doing? Why did they come here?
Some kind of instinct, memory of what they used to do. This was an important place in their lives.
But Romero's critique didn't chime with the public mood. Consumerism was about to lift off like nothing ever seen before. Economist Juliet Shaw has examined how the early 1980s laid the foundations for the almost limitless consumption we have today.
In the 70s, you had wages failing to keep pace with consumerism, which obviously created strife with unions and so on. I'm wondering how, in the 80s, how was it possible for consumerism to keep on the rails?
This was a period in which the nature of the sort of consumer culture changed from being one in which people aspired to something 10 to 15% more than what they had, to being a time when people started aspiring to be rich. And the mechanism that squares that circle, if you will, is consumer credit. Because this is also the time when consumer credit becomes much more available. And that's a relatively new thing. Now all you need to do is pull a little plastic square out of your pocket. It's like a sort of magic fetish. And boom, you're able to buy things that you didn't have the income for.
But easing credit was only the first piece in the jigsaw. A new technological innovation would also transform choice and make goods vastly cheaper. And it was brought about by this man, Mike Riddle. Riddle invented a computer program which became AutoCAD. Released in 1982, it allowed designers to use computers to tweak the shape of products in a way previously unimaginable. The explosion of choice would fill the giant new out-of-town retail parks.
What did computer-aided design enable designers to do?
It allowed us to make a lot of variations cheaply. The big impact was on cost, so that we could have hundreds of different designs. Instead of saying, here's the one standard toothbrush, we could have hundreds. They could all be a little bit different.
From now on, CAD would allow everything from perfume bottles and luggage to kitchen equipment, even deodorant bottles, to be designed on a computer.
The shape, the moulding, the shaping of things, that was a a new innovation as a result, wasn't it? The ability to do that.
Right. Before CAD, these products all tended to come in very, very similar containers. You would buy a bottle, like you look at shampoo or lotion bottles. They would all be a straight cylinder, a different top, maybe a different label. Now, everyone has a different shape, subtle curves to it, things they would never have thought of before because it would have been too expensive.
By enabling an array of dizzying choice, CAD made things desirable and cheap. And this new 1980s world of consumer wonder created an unprecedented consumer binge.
New products become very important. The turnover in the fashion cycle really shrinks, and that's part of what my research shows, which is the amount of time between when a household or a person buys something and when they discard it, because it is no longer socially valuable, not because it doesn't work anymore. It still has utilitarian value, but because it is passé. It's no longer something that is worth anything because there's a new model out.
And the trailblazer for disposability was the reinvention of the watch. Swatch's supercharged ads show how they turned an old-fashioned business based on quality which lasted a lifetime into the symbol of 80s fast, disposable consumerism.
These days, it's fashion that makes us tick. Swatch, the new wave in Swiss watches.
Oh, wow, this is your collection of watches.
Yep.
Darren Clare worked as head of sales for Swatch in the UK.
Darren, how was Swatch able to turn a watch from something that you had for a lifetime to you know, basically these, you know, owning one of these and then wanting another one and another one and another one?
I think really the key was linking into the fashion industry and also having 100+ new watches every single year being launched. So we had a spring, summer and an autumn, winter collection every single year.
As glamorous as a Duran Duran video, the ads were aimed at young, fashion-conscious consumers.
I like your Swatch. Sink or swim in it, work out in a gym in it. A Swatch is made to take it because it's Swiss-made. Swatch!
And it was brand new. I mean, I think it was literally market-changing because nobody had done anything like this before.
Swatch wanted people to buy 4 watches a year. They sold 1 million in 1983, their first year, and by 1986 were selling 12 million.
Swatch revealed how much money could be made by turning what had been a long-lasting consumer item into a frequent purchase. And even though a Swatch was cheap, it was made desirable by